Well, it's 4:30, so I guess it's time to start, or people will drop in. So I wanted to start by welcoming you all to this webinar, where we will be giving you the highlights of the sessions that the 2 Pint team held at MMS this year. My name is Karen Hederoth, and I am Customer Success Manager at 2 Pint Software. For me, it was the first time at MMS this year, and I really enjoyed it. It was so nice to meet the people in the community and to be part of the knowledge sharing that takes place there. We put together this session to give you, who did not have the chance to listen to us there, to give you the best pieces of what we talked about there. These are the topics that we will cover today. So first, I will give you a short introduction of 2Pint Software, and then Tim and Johan will dig deeper into branch cache and deliver optimization state of the union, upgrading to Windows 11, and imaging from the cloud. During this session, there will be 3 ways to ask questions. You can either type a question in the chat under the Q&A section, or you can press the raise your hand button and I will unmute you. So 2Pint Software was founded in 2014, so it's been around for almost 9 years now, or 9 years exactly. It's founded by Andreas and Phil, who both by now have over 25 years of experience in this industry. And there's a story to the 2Pint name, and as I get it, it goes a little like this. The company sprang from 2 strong wills and 1 really cool technology. First, they had this will to create a company that was different, that was more fast and agile, that could adapt to new technology and ideas with speed and ease, as a contrast to the very slow and stiffness from many of the companies they had been working with before in their careers. Second of all, there was a will to save and nurture those amazing ideas that often came up after sharing exactly 2 pints of beer in the pub with the colleagues. Those ideas that most of the time just got buried in the corporate structures and never really saw the light of day. Alongside of this, they came across this amazing Microsoft technology called branch cache that the rest of the world just didn't get and understand, but they did. So out of this, and loads of hard work and dedication, came 2Pint Software. And here we are today, a leading provider of delivery optimization. Sorry, losing me a little bit here. A leading provider of innovative solutions for software distribution, deployment, and network management. And from the very beginning, we've been very focused on modern system management. And that is what we do today, help clients and companies build better infrastructure for this. And widely speaking, you can say that we have 4 main areas that we focus on. So we do OS deployment and provisioning, content distribution and bandwidth management that allows you to distribute and store software updates and content efficiently across the network, which reduces the reliance on external servers and accelerates the deployment of updates. We also do real-time analytics and have reporting capabilities that gives you instant insights on the infrastructure and the health and performance of your network. We do secure boot, and 2Pint Software is the only vendor that's listed today that has signed binaries for iPXC by Microsoft for secure booting. We still like to work with neglected and cool technology, such as Config Manager, Intune, Branch Cache, Delivery Optimization, LEDBET, etc. And being a Microsoft partner, what we do is not that we make other products that try to compete with this, but we rather work together with Microsoft to develop products that help these technologies perform at their very best. The community is really in our core, and we always try to contribute to both Microsoft and the open source community. And we are the largest open source contributor to PowerShell deployment and iPXC, integrating with Microsoft and Linux platforms. We also try to give back to the society by giving free licenses for all government, education, and nonprofit organizations. And on this note, I will hand over to the good hands of Tim, who will start digging deeper into the technology.
Awesome. Thank you, Karin. Hey, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Tim Mittner. I am fairly new to 2Pint. I've only been with 2Pint for a little over 2.5 months, 3 months or so. But I've been in the industry for just a bit of time, 25 plus. I think I stopped counting at 25 years or so. It makes it easier. It's like people don't ever get past 39. Well, I don't work past 25 years. So, I'm going to be covering today the branch cache and delivery optimization state of the union session. This session was, there were 2 sessions that were actually originally delivered by Phil and Andreas. So I noticed that they are on the call. So it's a little bit like, when you get up and you try to cover a song with the artist right in front of you. But I will do my best, and I'm sure they can jump in if there are additional questions that I can't handle. So let's jump right in, and then I hand it over to Johan to bring us home. So what you see on the screen here is a typical traffic problem in most cities. And so we've got this view of like, one more lane is going to fix the problem. So I live in a city, I live in Austin, Texas. It's been crazy. We've grown by 1.25 million people in less than 10 years. And so during that time, they decided, well, we're going to try to build more roads. And that hasn't worked out very well, because they add 1 lane when they should be adding 3. And so there's always this view that 1 more lane is going to fix the problem, and you end up with this. I'm not sure where this picture was actually taken from, but it reminds me a little bit of the Houston area. If you've ever been there, there are parts of Houston where there are literally 12 lanes on each side of the road, where they've just continued to build and build and build. So we've got the same issue with traffic, internet traffic. Bandwidth will always get consumed. No matter how much bandwidth is there, we will always consume it. Same is true if you see me drop off camera later on in the presentations, because I'm expecting a FedEx delivery for a new lab device because I ran out of RAM on my, so it's, again, you're consuming the amount of space that is available to you. All right, so just to give you an example, I'm going to show you some data. This is actually a little bit of an anonymized data that we actually got from one of our customers. So the April 11th, 2022, this is the amount of data in one of our customer environments. And you can see here, it's a little over 2 terabytes of data for delivery optimization. So you can see even in 2022, the DO traffic has surpassed the bits traffic within organizations. And so we get a little over 2 terabytes in DO and just shy of 2 terabytes on the bits traffic. So do you think 2023 will be more or less data? You can just put it in chat. Double. Yeah. Yeah, you're pretty close. We are almost double the traffic. So you can see here, DO has really taken off in this particular case. So we've got close to 4 terabytes of data, and this is just from a single day of traffic within this customer environment. And it's not a huge customer. There was about 50,000 clients, mostly config manager in their environment. Mostly Windows 10. So this isn't even really taking into account a lot of Windows 11 devices, which really uses a lot of delivery optimization as well. But you can see here that the bits traffic has gone up considerably, which actually surprised us a little bit because you would think as more traffic gets moved over to delivery optimization, there will be less traffic on the wire for bits. But what we've seen is that is not the case because there are other technologies that are end up using bits traffic that is consuming the network bandwidth. So if we just look at bits in this particular customer, you can see that CM available package. It's essentially the software center. The ability to install software from software center is consuming a good portion of that traffic, as well as configuration manager. But OneDrive is still up there and going strong, and then edge updates are in there. So you can see applications are really starting to update themselves more and more. So you're seeing edge updates, Adobe updates, Chrome updates that are occurring, but that's not it. As you can see, as you get more towards the tail end of this, you can see more and more applications are starting to do more continuous delivery. Now, if you think about things from a developer perspective, or Microsoft or Google perspective, they're not really developing these applications for the enterprise in mind. They're developing them for home users. And if you're a home user, you've got 50, 100, 200 gigabit internet if you're lucky. And so just downloading one or two machines with those updates, it's not that big of a deal. The trouble is when you start spreading this across 25, 50, 100,000, 200,000 endpoints, then it becomes challenging for customer environments. Because all of these applications are consuming network bandwidth. You don't have control over when they consume that bandwidth, and they just choose to update whenever they want to. On the DO side, a huge chunk of that is Microsoft Store traffic. There's Windows Update traffic, Office click-to-run traffic as well. Intune, this particular customer didn't use a lot of Intune in their environment, but Intune will start to consume more of that traffic in delivery optimization. So for Microsoft Store, you might be thinking, well, I'm not really using the store, so it's not going to consume that much bandwidth in my environment. Well, the reality is Microsoft has componentized tons of things within Windows itself, and the only way that those items are updated is through the Microsoft Store. So things in Windows 11 like the start menu or the logon screen, that nice little background that you get on the logon screen with the neat graphics. Guess where that comes from? That comes from the Microsoft Store. So all of that is coming from the store, and the bad thing is if you're disabling store traffic within your environment, you're not getting updates for that. So we've talked to a number of customers that are like, well, we solved the DO problem because we disabled DO in the environment, and we disabled Microsoft Store traffic in the environment. Well, now you've got a different problem because you're no longer getting security updates for things like the logon screen, which is just a little bit important in your environment. So if you look at the store updates, like kind of the top 20 store updates, you can see things like calculator and sticky notes and maps and Microsoft tips and things like that. So these are the things that are consuming a good majority. It gives you a good idea of what you might need to remove from your environment as well. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the underlying technologies for branch cache and delivery optimization. So I'm going to start a bit on branch cache, cover DO as well. So there are basically two modes of branch cache. There's distributed, which is what we primarily use, and that is where you've got branch cache distributed throughout your environment. So you're using peer-to-peer technology. And then there's hosted, where you're storing the files on a server that can be accessed centrally. BC branch cache can be used with Configuration Manager. It throws me off to still see Microsoft Intune Endpoint Configuration Manager, but it's Configuration Manager for packages, app updates, OS deployments. You can kind of view it as a WAN accelerator. So it allows you to do peer-to-peer on your local network, but think of it as Riverbed, but only for management content or software distribution content. It can save you a ton of bandwidth, petabytes of network traffic, especially if you spread it out over a year. It's going to make your users and your managers happy. So users are going to get their data faster. They're not always going across the WAN link. They're actually getting their data locally on the network segment. And the nice thing is your managers aren't going to get a call while they're on their golf course basically saying, hey, Configuration Manager took the network down again in your environment. So getting started. So a couple things. You're going to, if you're working with Configuration Manager, you're going to need to enable branch cache on your server. Specifically on your distribution points. And you're also going to enable branch cache on your client. There are ports depending on your setup. You could be using different ports. I think branch cache by default will use port 80. We don't generally like to use that, so we'll change that to within our customer's environment. We use 1337, and so but you can change that to a different port. It's a little bit easier to manage that traffic or see that traffic if it's across a different port. You're going to have to worry about firewalls and your network settings as well. So branch cache does leverage, as well as DO does leverage multicast. So you're going to need to have your clients communicating with each other. A little bit more advanced. You want to enable dedupe. In fact, branch cache can use dedupe. Now, this is really important because this can save you quite a bit of network bandwidth by itself. So even if I have a single endpoint on a remote location, I can still get quite a bit of savings by using branch cache, by using deduplication. So give you an example. So if I have a monthly update for my Windows 10 or Windows 11, my quality updates that need to go out, the next month comes out, there's a good chance that about 75–80+% of that data is the same as what occurred the previous month. And so when it downloads that data, it's only going to download the blocks of data that are different. So dedupe is going to save you quite a bit of network bandwidth. And when you tie that into something like OS deployment, if I look at, say, an HP driver pack or a Dell driver pack, behind the scenes, they're all using Intel NICs or Intel system drivers and things like that. And so there's quite a bit of overlap between that. So you can still save quite a bit through deduplication. And so even if you are in local mode only, you can still save quite a bit through deduplication. All right, so some things that you can do for troubleshooting branch cache. So if you have not used 2-Pint BCMon, you'll have access to the slide deck afterwards. You can download that. BCMon is an incredible tool. It's kind of funny. I've known about 2-Pint for 15 plus years or so. And so BCMon is one of the very first tools that Andreas and Phil used. I used BCMon way back in, probably 2013, 2014, somewhere around there. I used BCMon to start monitoring branch cache as soon as branch cache became available because we wanted to leverage it for remote locations. So it's a great way to see whether or not an endpoint has particular content cache. You can actually monitor branch cache traffic real time using BCMon as well. If you still have IE someplace, you can actually use the browser to troubleshoot branch cache a bit. So why IE and not Edge? Well, branch cache is only available for systems or applications that use WinHTTP on the endpoint. And Chromium-based browsers do not use WinHTTP. They actually have their own HTTP stack. And so you cannot use Edge or Chrome in order to troubleshoot branch cache because it's using a different stack, therefore it cannot use branch cache. There are a ton of branch cache commandlets that you can use. I've got a link to those as well as the netsh or netsh commands that you can use to view the cache and clear the cache on the endpoints. All right, let's get into delivery optimization a bit. So we're going to talk about some of the top 5 settings. There are a lot of delivery optimization settings. I think at last count, there are about 31 delivery optimization settings that you can set right now, but we'll cover some of the most important. We'll talk about download mode, restrict peer selection, background QoS, which is a little bit opposite of what you might think it is, delay, and Microsoft cached content server. So download mode. This really depends on your topology. And the biggest thing to set here is a group ID. If you're using our technology, we'll actually set that on our own through Stifle-R. But group ID is what is used to create peering groups. Now, if you're not using our technology, group ID can also be set by other tools like Config Manager, DHCP, or DNS suffix on that. But it's a way for you to define which systems in the environment can peer with one another. Background QoS, it sounds like if you just looked at that, you're like, oh, it's quality of service. So I need to define what my minimum quality of service is. But no, it's actually defining what the minimum download speed from a CDN. So if you set this too high, your systems will never peer-to-peer. So the default is basically 2,500 kilobytes per second. If you are at that or greater, then your systems are never going to peer. So if you want your systems to peer, you're going to need to lower this value, set it to a smaller number so that your systems will see, hey, I've got a lower speed on this, so I need to do my peering. All right. Another thing is to delay. So why do we do a delay? The reason why you want to do a delay is because it gives your systems more time to find peers for the content. So you can delay both the foreground application or the background application, or you can delay when it tries to go to a cache server and then falls back. Those are all possible to delay. We do recommend that you don't delay the foreground too much. Users kind of get mad. So what's a foreground application? It's like if you went to the Microsoft Store and you clicked on an application and chose to install it, that would be a foreground install. And so you might want to do that a bit, but don't delay it too much, or users will be like, I click on this and I wait, and nothing ever happens. So what's going on? But that's good to add. Another setting is restrict peer selection. Now, one thing to note, if you enable restrict peer selection, it's going to essentially ignore your group-based peering settings that you had previously set. But this is a good way to define if you want to restrict peers based on a particular NAT. So anything behind a particular NAT address would get delayed. Another way to do that is based on a subnet mask, or you can enable through DNS-SD and restrict selection based on whether or not DNS-SD is enabled. The default is now set to 1, so it always will restrict peers behind a NAT. All right. Troubleshooting is critical within delivery optimization as well. Johan's got a great blog on how to look through the delivery optimization logs. Another thing to check is just to make sure you can connect over 7680. So Telnet, Testnet connection, and PowerShell is a good way to see if you can do peer-to-peer on 4DO. Great way to test this is to use store applications. So usually what I do when I do demos is I take something fun like Minecraft Education and I download that. It's a little over a gig in size just to watch, and then you can see it whether or not it's peering. There are some example updates out there you can do. And the settings app within Windows 10, Windows 11 will allow you to look at the DO activity monitor to see what your efficiency is for your delivery optimization. All right, so key takeaways for this. Like everything is updating all the time. So if you want to reduce your bandwidth in your environment, 1, use peer-to-peer branch cache delivery optimization. 2, try to eliminate the things that you don't need. So if it's not installed, it's not going to update. If you don't need the Xbox functionality on your Windows devices, remove that from the system. Try to remove the inbox applications that are absolutely not needed. Monitor, obviously, see what is being used on your network. Try to get this to where you're doing automatic configuration. No one wants to go through and modify these things one setting at a time. And last is pre-cache your content on your local network segments for branch cache. And so the other thing to do is if you start noticing like Chrome updates, Edge updates, you might look at other mechanisms to provide those updates on your network using Configuration Manager or other tools. A lot of people don't even realize that their technology is doing that behind the scenes. So it goes back to monitoring and then analyzing. So you need to put the smack down at all times and continue to monitor and change as necessary. All right. If you have questions, feel free to put them in chat. But otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and hand over to Johan to talk about Windows 11 and cloud imaging. Over to you, Johan.
All right. Thank you very much. Let's see if I'm going to change my microphone to this one. Can you still hear me okay? Audio's coming through good. Awesome. I'll go ahead and share one of my screens here. This, by the way, is the delivery optimization reference guide up on Microsoft. I was reading that earlier for fun, as you do. But here, upgrading to Windows 11. First of all, my name is Johan Arvidmark. I'm an engineer with 2-Point Software. Been there since 2019, but I have worked with Andreas and Phil many years before that. I'm also old. Been doing this for quite some time, about 3 decades now, and it's mighty hard to see, but behind me over there, I have a SMS1 CD that I saved away from the early days of, well, before Config Manager was Config Manager, put it that way. But the journey to Windows 11 is very much real. Microsoft announced, I think it was February, March timeframe. They will no longer support Windows 10 after 2025. That's the wording that it is right now, and that means organizations have to move over to Windows 11 to continue to receive updates, security updates, and other things, of course, and additional hardware support, because the hardware industry usually don't stand entirely still as the years go by. They usually come up with new processors and new storage types and new bus types and new everything, and the operating systems must be able to support that as well. And that's where Windows 11 comes into the picture. Additional CPU types, even security processors and whatnot. Good news is that if you really like the Windows 10 background that I kept for historical reasons here, it's very easy to migrate that over as well. And a fun fact, I think, is that a lot of people don't know the story behind it. So for later, I'm going to share a little link with you in the chat here. It's actually a short video on how this particular background was made, because you think it was just computer graphics. Heck no, they went all in when they was creating this background image. And all in all, I kind of like that one a little bit better than the Windows 11 one. Personal preference, but that's me. Now, going to Windows 11 is not terribly different compared to how you guys have done servicing in Windows 10 in the past. The difference is now that there are no ways currently to use enablement packages, unfortunately, to go to Windows 11 or even service Windows 11. So it doesn't matter if you're going from Windows 10 to Windows 11, or if you're going from the first version of Windows 11, 21H2, to the current version, 22H2, it is still a full setup exit-driven process. And that means that you're up to everything from half an hour to an hour and a half deployment time or upgrading time when you upgrade to Windows 11. The upgrade itself will take place in multiple phases. You have the down level phase, that's basically in the old OS, what's going on there, a lot of the prep work, compatibility scanning and other things. Then it's what's called a safe OS. That's after the first reboot, when the machine comes up in WinRE and start to prepare for the final phase, which is the new OS, so the new version coming up. And so at the bare minimum, you will always have 2 reboots in an upgrade, but sometimes you will have more depending on what you do in your environment and what version of Windows you are going from. On the good side is that Microsoft has actually figured out how to make this faster. And I will share you some lessons that we have learned over the years. Our organization is currently working with, I think, one of the absolute largest Windows 11 migrations in the world at the moment. And when you do things at scale, you do learn a lot of things that you can also bring with to smaller environments, because you can do X thousands of machines a day, guess what? You can do a few hundreds also. But I'm hoping at some point that Microsoft will change into enablement packages because it's such a nice technology. For those of you who have migrated, say, Windows 10 21H2 into a 22H2, you know that you download a tiny patch. It's like, I think the last one was like 200 kilobytes or something. I saved a copy here somewhere, just for the fun of it. I like demos, by the way. I happen to be like that. Yeah, this one, 177 kilobyte. That's easier to deploy content-wise than a 4 gig WIM file. So, but unfortunately, Windows 11 is not there yet. This is what we have to deal with. And there are things you guys can do to make this a lot better. And we will continue to share this story for the next 2.5 years, because that's about the time you have. In the fall of 2025, you have to have upgraded to Windows 11 one way or another. But we have identified a few things that you can do to make this experience much better. First of all, depending on technology, if you're using Intune, if you're using Config Manager, whatever you do to drive these upgrades, you do have options available. You can put in additional controls into the process to make it better. For example, I am a big fan of using sequences for upgrades, including Windows 11 ones, primarily because it gives additional control to the process. And it also allows me to break down the process into multiple phases. So, as a bare minimum, you can think of an upgrade as two things. One, get the content down to the machine somehow. Second, drive the upgrade. The beautiful thing about the first part is the user don't need to know about that. You don't need to interrupt the user just because you want to send some content in the background to them. So what we frequently do for customers is that we put in specific sequences that we use for two different phases. This one here that I labeled validation, this one is responsible for do some basic checks on the environment, making sure I'm somewhat ready to be upgraded to Windows 11. So I'm starting to check for things that I know would break stuff otherwise. I'm making sure I have enough memory for the upgrade to run. I'm making sure that I have enough disk space for the upgrade to run. Don't listen to the minimal spec that Microsoft put out there for minimal requirements. I think the official listing like 13 or 14 gigs. Yeah, the upgrade may run on that environment, but it will be slower. You will leave a machine behind that has maybe a gig left. And deploying Windows to someone or upgrading someone's Windows box and leave them with 1 gig of free disk space, that is rude. That is not a happy machine at all. So at least a little bit more disk space. And I recommend also making sure that you're actually upgrading clients. Over the years, historically, there have been organizations that very successfully upgraded their data centers to a Windows client OS. Not recommend. It's usually not the intention. Remember back in the days, it was a bank in Australia that got completely flattened by a consultant from a hardware vendor we should not mention by name. It wasn't us. We don't do hardware. But they upgraded their servers successfully. They were down for a week. So don't do that. I usually recommend to make sure that power is plugged in, because an upgrade can take a while. It can take an hour and a half, as I mentioned, sometimes more. And it's not entirely ideal for the setup process if power goes out. If you are on Windows, it kind of recovers because it realizes, oh crap, I'm about to run out of disk power. It will save the process. But if you are in the WinRE phase during the safe OS and power goes out, it aborts. It cuts the power right away, and you have a machine that's in a very interesting state. Sometimes, if you do have wired networks, I recommend to use those. But we have a lot of customers that actually, a lot of their fleet is indeed on wireless. And if that's the case, well, skip this one. Now, why are these two important? Well, Windows 11 requires them. There is no point of trying to upgrade a system that is not even remotely ready for Windows 11. So check this first. Do some basic validation. And then I recommend to do some upgrade assessments, basically doing a what if. You run the setup without doing the setup. It will just run the same compatibility scan that would happen in an upgrade without doing the upgrade. Because again, you can run this silently in the background and you can collect the result. You can learn which devices in your organizations that are ready for an upgrade compared to the ones that are not. There are other ways to check for basic compatibility, like deploying a hardware readiness script and things like that. You can leverage endpoint analytics and other things to figure out how ready your devices are in the environment. But this one is the real deal. This one actually does a very comprehensive test of your device and will tell you, yes or no, I'm ready to go for an upgrade. So we deploy this sequence first to all the devices that we're planning on upgrade. And the benefit of the way we deploy this sequence is so that we can also not bother the user, but the important setting here is this one. Anyone in the audience happen to know what the effect of setting this setting is? This is not default. This is default in Config Manager. This is the one I have here. Tim is really not allowed to answer, nor Andreas or Phil thinking of it. No, it's making sure that the content stays in the cache. Yeah, David is, Rafal is spot on there. Exactly. It will make sure that the content stays in the cache, because that means I have validated the machines that are ready. I'm making sure they have everything they need, they are compatible, and the content is on the disk. To those devices, I can go ahead and do the actual upgrade. So this is the second sequence I will deploy. I will still do these basic checks because they're so fast, they run very, very quickly. But then I will do the upgrade without this one here. So now I'm doing the entire upgrade, and in the end, I will fix up whatever the setup upgrade broke. It could very well be that you have to reinstall some applications to do some changes or apply a different start menu layout or whatever that you want to do. But this is up to you to control this behavior. But what we found over the years is having this two-phased approach gives you better confidence, better reliability, and more importantly, fewer failures in your upgrade. You will still have to add in additional things like driver support and whatnot, and problem is the vendors won't really tell you. I have not seen a website where you can go and say, hey, dear vendor, I'm having these 12 models from you. I'm having this version of Windows 10. I'm going to this version of Windows 11. Please tell me what drivers I need, and please tell me what BIOS version I need to be on. Because you may very well have to update BIOS and provide driver packages for that upgrade. The only way to achieve that is to do your own testing. So unfortunately, Windows 11 upgrades it takes a while to prepare for them. It takes a while to do them, but feature-wise, it's not very different to what you always have been doing for the past 8 years. Because when Windows 10 came back in 2015, for the first 5 years in Windows 10 history, every upgrade was a setup exit-driven upgrade. It wasn't until recent years Microsoft figured out the enablement package, and then they figured out they couldn't use them for Windows 11, but that's another story. So if you have been doing this for a while, you're in good shape, but you still have to continue to do that testing. And something I like to point out that I think is valuable in this scenario is that, well, this was from another presentation apparently. Windows 11 upgrades and drivers. A machine is going to end up in one of 4 states, one of 4 scenarios for drivers. One scenario, unlikely if you're going from 10 to 11, very likely if you're going from one 11 to another 11, is that you don't have to do anything at all. It basically means that whatever drivers that were on the system happen to work beautifully on the next version of Windows that you're going to. All right, that will happen, or may happen. The other one is that you may have to upgrade drivers prior to an upgrade. Because there are security features in Windows that will downright refuse to install anything. A setup will say nope if you don't have the right drivers on the system. Core isolation is one of those features. Quite rare as well. The most common one, by far the most common one, is that you need to provide drivers during the upgrade. Very easy to do in Config Manager, tad more tricky to do with Intune, but it is doable. And the final one, which is also quite rare, it is that you actually have to remove drivers. There are scenarios where the hardware that you have is a little bit older, and the vendors may or may not provide a driver package for it. What usually happens in that case is that Microsoft will step in and provide an inbox driver for it. But the way driver ranking works in Windows is that it will not prioritize a third-party vendor, an inbox driver, if there is a third-party vendor driver on the box. Doesn't matter if that driver is 10 years old, it's still going to win that ranking selection. So sometimes you need to move away the drivers prior to doing an upgrade. It's not terribly complicated. There's a little command line tool that you can use to I cannot even type today either. pmputil.exe can be used to remove drivers that you have in the system. The trick is usually figuring out which driver to remove, because they're not exactly named the same way always. If you use the pmputil tool, you will see that the delete driver command expects a file name. This is from your Windows in folder. They are different on different systems. An NVIDIA driver on my machine may be OEM5 or OEM6. On Tim's computer, it may be 3, on Karin 7. So when you work with this, you typically have to script it to actually parse the drivers so you learn about, okay, this is the one I need to remove, and then you go ahead and remove it. But parsing text files in PowerShell is not terrible, so it can be done with a little bit of motivation. BIOS upgrades. You may have to upgrade BIOSes. Otherwise, the installation will not work. About 2 years ago, HP, for example, they published a list of 20-some of their models where they declare that if you are any of these machines or models, you absolutely have to be on this BIOS version or the Windows upgrade will not work. It will downright fail. It wouldn't kill the device, but it will break the upgrade. So you may have to deal with that as well. And until recently, Microsoft did not offer any built-in stuff to do stuff like this. However, in March this year, they released the first milestone in a control plane for drivers and firmware from Microsoft across all vendors. They are not there yet. The GUI is coming to Intune. It's almost ready. Right now, you have to manage it through PowerShell. but there is a lot of information missing still on the platform, but it's a giant and great first step. They've been working on this for 2 years. So long story short, there will be options for you guys to leverage Windows Update for drivers and firmware, but in a controlled fashion. Yeah. Any questions? I love questions. I'll even take a question from Tim. All right. So that leads us to this.
You didn't really cover the updated media, why that's important, but
I'll be happy to. Tim says, using updated media. The reason this is it's a good point. It's a great point. You will find that you will have fewer failures if you are using an updated media. Absolutely. And we are talking monthly media. I don't care if your project is running for 6 months. You will update the media every month. That will reduce the number of failures. We haven't seen so much in Windows 11 yet because, again, Windows 11 is fairly new. But there have been several bad support cases with Windows 10 where organizations were trying to upgrade using an older media, and it will wreak havoc. Things will break left and right. One of the upgrades, if you were on the wrong version or like monthly build of Windows, you did an upgrade, every single certificate gone from the devices. Not great. So yeah, it's a good one. Any other questions or comments? Tony had a good question there. What about BitLocker upgrade or issues? It depends on how you do the upgrade. If you just go to a machine that is BitLockered already and you run an upgrade, the Windows setup is smart enough to suspend it and put it back after the fact. But as the follow-up comment from Rafael was, well, what if you do more things? We may do additional things. We maybe have a BIOS to UEFI conversion somewhere, or maybe we do a BIOS update at some point. You may have to keep it suspended longer. So what I quite commonly see is that organizations are putting in actions, PowerShell or a command line, that will suspend BitLocker for multiple reboots. And then when they're done with the upgrade, they just flip it back on again. So that's perfectly okay as well. But great question. Thank you. Any other questions? Martin is asking, how do you feel about using, well, basically use the dynamic option for setup when you do an update in a sequence? In sequences, I would not use it because it's so easy to have the media updated every month instead. And with an updated media comes already updated compatibility catalogs as well as an updated setup. However, if you're using something else, like Intune, you absolutely must. Because the media that Intune is using is often old or older. And if you're using ESD files instead of WIMP files, that media is also typically older. And then you'll be enforced to use it. To give an idea what a little bit of context. If I have an upgrade sequence like this one here, I can select to use a ready-made image that I downloaded from Microsoft and extracted the index from. but I can also use a feature update from my environment. This will be an ESD file. They will be old. Now, if I do that, I don't have as many options down here available, but there is one benefit to this. If you're using cloud imaging, deploy over Cloud Management Gateway, where you have to pay for the download, you can get this one for free. You can get this one directly from Microsoft. You don't have to have it in your environment. This one, you will have to pay for the download, about 50 cents, give or take, per machine. Unless you're using peer-to-peer, then you want to pay for the first one. So, but I definitely recommend it for scenarios where you are using an older media. For config manager sequence in general, I recommend to use updated WIM files. From a transfer point of view, it is not bad at all. Say that you have an environment that looks like this, and I happen to have the privilege of working with quite a few environments that have a distributed. They have a bunch of offices everywhere, but they have a central location where they have their servers. So if you update your media here, say now it's June, so you have a Windows 11 media from June up on the DP, you deploy a device with it down here. The thing is, when using peering technologies, this machine is going to keep a copy of the June version of Windows 11. Now, next month, after we sobered up from 4th of July, we're going to deploy the July media. So now we have the July media on the DP, and we will deploy maybe another machine here with the July Windows 11 media. Since branch cache works on a block level, the delta is only going to be transferred over the wire here. 90% of the content is going to come from a local friend. Because on a block level, we are talking about a few hundred megs at most that are different. And it's only the different blocks that needs to go over the wire. And then, of course, now this machine has the full package. So when you start to deploy other machines in this location, there will be no traffic at all over the WAN link. Well, some traffic for the policy and other things, but not, packages coming down. So for those of you using Intune, it is a little bit trickier. But what you do need is an Adam in your life. Adam Gross, more specifically. He's very active in the community, but he has posted some instructions on how to leverage a configuration file for setup, and this is valid for Windows 11 as well. But if you provide this one using Intune, using a proactive remediation script, using something so it's available on the device, yes, then you can also control behaviors for updates. So I'll put this link in the chat. It's a good read for those of you. And apparently my copy and pasting skills can be improved. Give me a moment. Oh, that's a good read. Yes. Let's see. I don't see any other questions. All right. Let's move on. Cloud imaging, as Kari mentioned earlier, this is something that Tupent has been contributing to a lot in terms of PowerShell deployment and other solutions to basically do pixie moving over internet and to deploy machines no matter where they are in the world. They are at home, they're remote office, they're on a construction site, they are on an oil rig. As long as they have internet access, we can making sure they are deployed. And over the years, we've been helping organizations not just for traditional build, but we also help them to recover their infrastructures after ransomware attacks. To give some context, before joining Tupent, I was with a security organization for about 15 years. And every year as time went by, it just gotten worse in terms of ransomware attacks. When I left, we were at most dealing with maybe 20 a year, recovering organizations who has been hacked. When I talk to my friends that are still working for TrueSec, they are up into over 200 a year. And think of it, if you have all your servers and clients encrypted, it is no fun at all. And you have to rebuild them from something. Yeah, but the problem is that the thing that you used to rebuild stuff with is no longer available to you. That's where cloud imaging comes in play. You can have a VM up in Azure or Amazon or any data center available to you, and you can image device client servers from that one. So that's something we've been working with quite frequently the last 4 or 5 years, providing solutions to do exactly that. Some of the customers we work with, this is their main deployment solution. They don't image at home. They haven't been attacked, but they use this as their primary way of deploying because it's available everywhere for them. Now, if you look at the pillars around cloud imaging, there are 4 pieces that need to exist. One is you need to have some sort of infrastructure, and there are actually not too many to choose from. I will come back to that in a second. Then it's all about starting the process. How do we initiate an imaging process from a device that is at someone's home or in a remote office that may not have a VPN to your network or something like that? Then it's about transferring the content as effective as possible. And then it's about monitoring the process. Monitoring is tricky because when you guys do deployment in-house, you can have any monitoring solution you want. We're kind of hoping you would like to use ours, but it's your network. You can do whatever you want. But when you deploy over internet, you can't really just stumble into an ISP and say, hey, AT&T, would you mind if I put in our software here on the server in your network? I'm just going to monitor traffic. That's all. That it's going to be frowned upon. They're going to say no. So that's where we come into the picture, allowing you to actually monitor traffic, no matter if it happens on your network or off your network. We have customers running their monitoring software in the cloud as well, up in Amazon or Azure. So a lot of options there. But infrastructure. Currently, there is only one cloud imaging solution that is supported by Microsoft, and that is Config Manager, extended with Cloud Management Gateway. It's a paid service. It's about $100 per month, depending on what VM size you pick and how many you pick. But then you also pay for download and storage. But that's the only officially supported version there is. However, as Karin mentioned, we have been involved quite a bit in extending the good old Microsoft Deployment Toolkit with a smidge of PowerShell, a lot of PowerShell. We call it the PowerShell deployment. You can run it anywhere. You just need a VM, and we can assist you in managing that platform from a network transfer point of view, and we can assist you in pixie booting that environment. I will come back to that in a minute. There are some other community efforts out there, like OSD Cloud. It was developed by David Segura. He's with HP now, and he's been a little bit less active, but it's still an active project, even though it's not expanding as it used to be. But that's also an option to do cloud imaging. I could also not mentioning Windows Autopilot. This is not imaging. It can be connected with imaging, but this is just a technique to enroll devices into typically Intune, into management. Can be VMware too, but it's typically Intune. Sometimes when organizations, especially your managers, they will talk to Microsoft sales reps, and they will come back to the office and say, hey, forget imaging. We are going to go all in Windows Autopilot. Oh, okay. So who is going to deploy Windows to the device? Oh, we don't need Windows. Autopilot will solve everything. No, it does not. Someone needs to put Windows on the device. Otherwise, there will be no enrollment into anything. What Microsoft wants is that someone is not you. That's what they really mean. They mean to outsource that to someone else, to Dell, to a service partner. But we have a lot of customers who keep deploying stuff that they always have done, and they're just using this as one of the tools to enroll devices into management. For some of our customers, this is their primary method to enroll devices, and they integrate that with their deployment solution. But to give an idea how this can look, let me go to one of my demo devices. This one I think will do. Just going to make sure my demo server is running. Yes, all right. And I'm going to move this device to Liverpool because in Chicago I only have Config Manager. And we're going to try to do a deployment. Very exciting. I happen to like it. Here we are. Pixie booting over an HTTPS resource. No UDP, no TFTP. When I'm downloading a boot image, it's going to be straight from HTTPS, wherever that HTTPS server might be. The only port you need to have open for this part, 443. But I just downloaded a boot image from a web server in, I don't know what, few seconds. If there would be a local friend on the network having done that earlier, the boot image will come from that local friend. Otherwise, it will come from wherever you're hosting that web server. Internally, externally, doesn't matter. So this is WinPE running. We are leveraging the background info to just provide some update on the progress. But as you can see, I'm now connecting to a web server, MD331 here, and a virtual directory on that web server. Give it some time to connect. But here we are. Now, in the back end of this, it is what appears to be a regular MDT deployment share. I have my images, I have my sequences. This is one I was using for Autopilot. We added in Autopilot into the sequence or the steps to enroll into it. Or it could be a regular deployment, but where we also added in peer-to-peer capabilities, because that was something that we added into the platform because MDT by default doesn't do it. So that means if I would spin up a few other machines in Liverpool, like these machines over here, just making sure I have enough memory. Yeah, I'm still good. Give these a moment to power on. I think I may need a new lab server too, Tim. Come on, yeah. I only have like 50 VMs running. Shouldn't. All right, that's good enough. All right, so if I go back to my virtual machine, I will go through a regular deployment wizard. This one is customizable. There are different themes you can apply to it. Think Winamp and skins, but themes. How many of you remember Winamp? I used to love it back in the days, playing music. Side story. Sequences, you pick the sequence that you want to deploy, Windows 10, Windows 11, whatever that is. You give it a name. And these different wizard panes that you see here, they can be toggled on or off by the control file on the server. But here we are, password, we do no settings, get a summary, off we go. Now I'm going to do a regular deployment. This may look like a config manager sequence. It is, in a way, it is, because it's the config manager team that developed it, but it's a standalone version of it. So it runs completely on its own, no databases, no nothing required. But from now on, it's just a regular deployment of Windows. After formatting the hard drives, it's going to try to download drivers. I don't have any for virtual machines, but for physical, they will be downloaded, and then it will apply the WIM file. What we have done to improve performance for cloud imaging is to make sure that the driver packages that you would normally have here for your different models, they are actually in the file system as WIM files. That is not something that MDT is doing by default, but we had to add that in because it's just much more effective to download a single WIM file for a model compared to 1,000 small files. So if I would open this one as 7-zip and take a look inside, you will see the regular type of drivers that you are used to. Audio, video, NEC, whatnot. So that is all in the back end. Now well, it says it's injecting drivers, but it's just on that step. There are no drivers to inject. It found 0 packages for this VM. But this is going to be more interesting because eventually it's going to figure out that I need a Windows image, and it's going to go ahead and start to download that image. And due to the integration of our toolkit, you will get some additional progress bar here, additional details. And as you can see here, we get some okay deployment speeds. We usually get an image down in about a minute. And that's because we have local friends that have the content. If I have to do it directly from the web server, it's going to be your internet connection, and it's going to be the weak link here. But yeah, going to turn this one off. Doesn't get much more excited, and it will apply an image. But the thing is, the more friends that you have out there that may have been imaged already, the faster your deployments will go. Obviously, if you go to a new location, this is the first machine that comes up. Yeah, that one will have to get the content from internet. But all following deployments, they don't have to. We do offer a community version of the toolkit if you want to play around and test this. Have some videos up on our YouTube channel for this. And the 2 things that are missing in the community version is support is not included. That's something you would have to pay for, and it's also slower than the product we call it the turbo edition or turbo feature for it. But we have a paid product that will give you anything from 5 to 10 times the performance of peer-to-peer in WinP. So, but if you want to play around, don't hesitate to reach out. We can. You can download that from our website as well. Now, most of our customers for cloud imaging, we have a lot, maybe 90% of our customers are config manager customers. And if you want to use cloud imaging on that platform, you can do that as well. Quite simple. You go to your environment, you spin up a cloud management gateway. I have one here. that I have configured. Because when you do, the only thing you need to do is to take your existing sequences that you have, and you need to make sure, whatever those sequences are, that you distribute their content also to the cloud management gateway server, which acts as a cloud distribution point. So it will show up here as a distribution point, but it is a cloud distribution point. But then it will allow you to deploy machines everywhere. The trick is, okay, cool. I have the servicing side or server side. It's either config manager with the CMG, or it's MDT with a hint of PowerShell, or a snitch of PowerShell, but we want to boot it. For organizations having control of their network, we offer having a central Pixie server running on one of your distribution points, or any server for that matter. It can serve 5,000 subnets easily around the globe, 50,000 clients or more. We have customers that are 10 times that size. But it will allow you to deploy or Pixie boot machines everywhere in the world, even at home. The trick is, okay, cool. So if I'm at home, how does my machine find your Pixie server? Well, I can assure you, if you go to your network team and say, hey guys, I have an idea. So we have 40,000 employees. And my idea is that we will call each and every one of them, and you will help them reconfigure their home router so it knows about our Pixie server. How do you feel about that? They will not feel good about that. You'll be running. So for home scenarios, it is actually the most common scenario to use USB sticks. But we recommend not to use a boot image on that USB stick, because what's the downside with boot images? If you would put WinP on a USB stick, what happens with that USB stick over time? It gets stale, gets old. There will be missing drivers. It will not work for all the hardware that you might have. What we recommend is to use a tiny USB stick. A USB stick that we provide a little tool to create. This one here called BootGen. If you don't like the GUI, you can run command line, but I'm going to show you the GUI version just for the fun of it. It's coming up in a moment. Just thinking about it. But this tool allows you to create a USB stick that only contains a few tiny binaries and a tiny kernel. Enough information to either go to a server that gets information from BGP, but you can also hardcode a server, or you can have a script figure out what server to connect to. But shorthand version, this is a USB stick that doesn't get old, because this one doesn't contain the boot image. It just contains instructions on where to talk to. So this is a good scenario for folks that are at home to initiate the deployment without risking to have stale devices. A cool thing about this USB stick also is that we'll keep a copy of all the data, all the branch cache data that you had, all the blocks of those files that you were using, drivers, images, applications will be on that device, heavily encrypted. Same encryption as data deduplication, same encryption in branch cache, because it is branch cache. So that means that if you deploy one device from a USB stick, it will save a copy of all the packets encrypted on that stick. So if you deploy a second device, guess what? It will come from that one. Not having to transfer anything of the wire at all. Some vendors that are, in my opinion, a little bit shinier than others, HP in this case, they actually allow you to stage directly in BIOS your own payload so that you can tell the BIOS what server to connect to. So you can basically apply a payload saying, when you hit F11 on an HP, you should not go to your HP recovery image solution, whatever they call it, Sure Recover. It will go to your deployment server that you have up in Azure, Amazon, or somewhere. The way it looks is like this. You press F11, it will go into factory recovery mode. But instead of doing a factory recovery, it will download your image, boot image. And it will initiate your deployment process and whatever that might look like. So we are pixie booting over internet, but in networks where we can't manage those networks, we provide USB sticks or BIOS configurations where you can tell the device where to go. One of our developers, and this is highly experimental, we have not released this, but I think it's cool. He figured out how to use a phone as a network card, iPhone, Android. So basically using the hotspot functionality and a USB cable. And that means that in WinPE, the phone will actually show up as a network card. And when testing, we got some pretty decent speed. We could deploy a machine in about 20 minutes over a phone. So we're pixie booting basically phones or from a phone. I like that. Sidebar, but fun sidebar. Transferring your content, we kind of covered a little bit, but we are using HTTPS for all our downloads. Best protocol you can use for transferring stuff over the internet. We are archiving drivers and applications into WIM files. My favorite example that I show basically all the time. Not many people know this, but I used to be a 3D animator in college, and I still stick to that every now and then. I try to do some sort of rendering. However, one of the software that I used back in the days was 3D Studio Max. And if you look at that package, it's not terrible. Not for being Autodesk at least, but it's not terrible. About 4 gigs in size. The challenge is it is 20,000 files. Is that an effective package to download from essentially a web server? Where it will do a little handshake for each and every file it downloads. No. Smack into a WIM file and have a wrapper install it instead. Because not only is it about a third of the size, it's a single file. This one downloads in a few minutes. This one will download in not a few minutes. More like half an hour. Plus it's 3 times the price because you pay for download. So we recommend doing this for applications and drivers. And this is something that we see in regular config managed customers starting to use as well, just to speed up their in-house deployment. Because it is a difference to downloading many small files compared to a single file. We have customers that are using, say, the PowerShell app deployment kit to have a standardized way of dealing with wrappers. But instead of having all the individual files in a structure, they have either a WIM file or another type of archive that they use to extract them. The beautiful thing about using WIM files, you don't have to extract it. You can just mount it. It takes like a second. And then you have the content available. You run your installer, you dismount it. You check one more time after you dismount it because sometimes it sticks around. You have to convince it sometimes, but that's what you do. All right. And finally, the monitoring piece. There is, of course, local logging available in all of these solutions, no matter what you pick. That's essential for logging But by leveraging our monitoring tool, Stifler platform, we do offer real-time visibility into each and every aspect of the deployment, including how effective it is from a peer-to-peer perspective and things like that. So we even provide some pretty advanced control of your networks on how that can be throttled down so you don't reuse all your bandwidth when you do certain types of imaging. But this is what's available built in. And good news is that Microsoft finally fixed so that you have some status messages when working with Cloud Management Gateway. It took them a while to fix that, but it's working now in the latest versions. So, were there any comments other than pricing? Yeah, okay, I saw Tim, yes, replied with that. All right, we're good. Yeah, that's what I always liked. I'm a bit biased here, obviously, but we have our pricing publicly on the website. No surprises. And we do charge by the endpoint. Let's see. Any other questions? We have still a whopping 5 minutes to go according to schedule. I can talk about this for weeks, but well, if there are no more questions, on behalf of the entire Turbine team here, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. Thank you for the feedback, the comments, the questions. Thank you, Kara and Tim, for organizing this and allowing me to talk about things that I like a lot. But I wish you a great rest of your day, and yeah, have a good one, everyone.
Thank you
Thanks,
so
Phil.
much. Bye, everyone.
All righty. Let's see. Can we stop the recording, or who started it?
It was automatic, so
All right, I'll go ahead and stop it. We don't need this, I think.